Hey everyone, welcome to this week's reading of Throne of Deceit with me and my co-author pdmac. If you've been following the other videos, you know where we're picking up from. So we're going to just jump into it, picking up on chapter 11 with Gwen. Gwen looked over the railing in the city of Pinchah was gone. In its place was a sight unlike anything she'd ever seen before. Where the city had been far below, this place was level with the terrace. White marble floors and walls created a massive empty space, except for the black altar that stood in the center. Where are we? Gwen asked, awed. This is the chamber of the altar, Eridor answered, and that, he pointed a slender hand, is the obsidian altar. This is a sacred place among prestige. This is where every prestige begins their path. They come here to learn of themselves. Once you know where your path leads, you can fully embrace the magic. Movement caught Gwen's attention, and she spotted a few people, mostly human, walking through the chamber. There was an elf among them, but he was quiet and aloof while the humans chatted amicably. Do you want to know who you truly are? Eridor asked. Gwen stared at the altar, struggling internally. Just a short time ago, she was serving the patrons of her father's inn. Now, she was with a strange elf in an even stranger place, contemplating becoming a prestige. She still wasn't sure what that meant, but the mystery was alluring. The image of the shadowy figure wearing a crown flashed in her mind, and she turned her gaze from the altar to Eridor. I do, but I'm afraid, she said. Afraid of what? I'm afraid of what I might find out about myself. I'm not sure I'm ready for things to change so drastically. Eridor leaned forward, and Gwen caught the aroma of woodland scents, trees, flowers, and an earthy smell that reminded her of freshly plowed farming ground all swirled together, adding to the exoticness of the elf. Change comes whether we want it or not, Eridor said softly. We can embrace it, or we can fight it. I've lived long enough that I've learned the latter brings only pain and heartache. Come, let us see what prestige you are. Eridor walked around the table and offered Gwen his hand. She accepted it and stood, doubt still tugging at her mind. The railing vanished before her eyes, and Eridor stepped down onto the marble floor. Gwen followed and released his hand, but remained close to his side. They walked slowly toward the altar, and Gwen's heart began pounding within her chest. When they were a few paces away, Gwen stopped. Eridor turned to her, his face expressionless. Gwen wondered how the elf was able to mask his emotions so well, but the thought was quickly drowned in the deluge of her anxiety. Eridor waited patiently until Gwen worked up the nerve to continue. She inhaled deeply and closed the distance to the altar. How does this work? Gwen asked. Sitting atop the altar, she spotted a polished dagger that looked like it was forged of silver and immediately regretted asking. The altar requires blood. Not much, Eridor added, seeing Gwen's face pale. Just a small amount. You'll cut your palm and touch the altar. The rest is different for everyone, but you will know which prestige you are. Gwen looked at the dagger. It was clean, not a trace of any blood or finger smudges on the hilt. The altar, too, was devoid of anything that would imply its purpose. Gwen was nervous, but her curiosity prevailed. She gingerly grabbed the dagger and pressed the tip against her palm. Her hand was trembling, but Eridor laid his hand on hers, steadying it. His touch helped calm her. She drew a breath and held it. In a quick movement, she pressed the blade hard against her skin and slashed down, slicing a gash down the middle. Her flesh spread apart and blood welled within the wound. Gwen hissed in pain and touched the top of the altar. She saw Eridor touch the side of the altar before a vision engulfed her. Someone screamed, and Gwen turned to look. She was rooted in place, her hand attached to the altar, but she saw the carnage. Bodies littered a long hallway, pools of blood growing beneath them all. A figure disappeared into a doorway, and there was another scream, this one a man. Despite her desire to flee, Gwen couldn't avert her eyes. The scenery moved around her of its own accord, and suddenly she was standing in the doorway. A man wearing a crown was crumpled on the floor, clutching at his wounded neck. Blood spurted between his fingers, staining his garments in his hand. Another man stood over him, a sword held tightly in his grasp. It was evident that the one standing was the culprit of the grisly crime. Long live the king, the man sneered. He stiffened suddenly and turned around. His face was masked by moving shadows, but Gwen was certain the man could clearly see her. You, he exclaimed with disbelief. A blue outline began to glow off the man, though he seemed oblivious to it. He stepped toward her, but the scenery pulled her away and began to fade. Before the vision was gone completely, Gwen spotted a woman among the bodies in the hall, also wearing a crown. Gwen blinked and exhaled slowly, not sure what to make of what she'd seen. Eridor was staring at her. You're the... He paused, then said, a mage. How do you know? Look at me. What do you see? An elf? Gwen said quizzically. Look closer, Eridor replied. Do you see anything out of the ordinary? Gwen squinted, but that didn't help. Then she noticed it. A faint glow around him, this one green. I see a green light, she said, but that explanation didn't seem right. Well, not a light, but something glowing. Eridor smiled. You have the gift of sight, he said. All mages have it. The color you see is called the aspect. Everyone gives it off, but no one is sure of its purpose. Who were those people in the vision? Gwen asked. Eridor shrugged. Who knows? Were they real? Did that slaughter really happen? It's possible, but we can't know for certain. The altar the vision gives is different for everyone. Some people see loved ones, and others see things that have no meaning at all. The important thing is that we now know what you are, a mage. Eridor was looking past Gwen at something behind her. She looked over her shoulder and spotted a black-haired man that gave her chills. He was flanked by 3 soldiers on either side, and they were heavily armed. What is the meaning of this? Eridor demanded as they approached. Gwen looked the man up and down. His clothing looked expensive. A navy shirt was tucked into black pants, and his boots shone with fresh polish. The man wore a flowing purple cape as well, and the gold clasps on his shoulders were fashioned into the shape of wolf heads. It was obvious to Gwen that the man viewed himself as important. His demeanor was borderline pompous. By order of His Majesty, the chamber is now closed and off limits. Please disperse immediately or suffer the consequences. Eridor stepped past Gwen and intercepted the man. King Torian holds no sway over this domain, the elf said. He does now. The man retrieved a scroll case from one of the soldiers and withdrew a rolled parchment. He unfurled it and held it out for Eridor to see. Gwen's mother had taught her to read at an early age, and she scanned the flowing script. It detailed how the king had revoked the treaty with the order, and the chamber of the altar was now property of the crown. At the bottom was the signature of the king and a stamp with his emblem. Torian goes too far, Eridor said. That's King Torian, the man retorted. Now take your servant girl and leave this place before I have you arrested. Gwen could tell by the anger on Eridor's face that he wanted to say something more, but instead he spun around and grabbed her hand, tugging her along back to the terrace of the tower. They crossed the threshold, and Gwen glanced back at the man. He stared after her, his gaze haunting her even after Eridor snapped his fingers and the chamber disappeared. Who was that? That was Victor, Eridor replied. He's one of Grimar the Magebreaker's lackeys. Magebreaker? That sounds ominous, Gwen said. Given what just transpired, it will be soon. He hates magic and those who practice it. I'm certain he's behind this move. The king has never taken issue with us before. Eridor stared off at nothing a moment, and then his face became devoid of any emotion. No matter. The order is likely dealing with the situation already. What's the order? It is the governing body of the prestiges. There's a hierarchy of leadership, but it's mainly for show. Most prestiges live solitary lives, but there are a few who serve their communities or hold positions of power within the court. I suspect that's about to change. I'm sorry to overwhelm you with these things, but it took me by surprise. Please, let's go back to the task at hand. All right, you said I'm a mage, Gwen asked. Yes, now that you have the sight, you can see people's aspects. How many colors are there? The man in the vision had blue, and yours is green. That's 2 at least. Each race has the same color. Human aspects are blue, elves are green, and dwarves are brown. There are others, but those are the main ones you'll see. Can I stop seeing the aspects? It's a little odd seeing colors coming off people. Unfortunately, no. You'll get used to it with time. Most mages don't even notice the aspects after a while. It becomes normal. Gwen was disappointed to hear that, but it was all too late to change her mind now. She peered over the railing and saw the city again. Dusk was beginning to creep over the landscape, and Gwen looked at Eridor, puzzled. It was mid-afternoon when Tobias and I got here. It looks like it's getting dark now. Is that some sort of illusion? No. Traversing vast distances by magic makes travel quicker, but the time still passes normally. Perhaps we should take a break to eat, then we can continue. How much is there to cover? Gwen asked. I can only provide the basics, since you are a mage. Magic works too differently for me to train you, and I can't see runes. There is a mage here in Penshaw that is part of the rebellion. She can show you your first room, but if you want more of them, you'll have to seek out other mages. First things first, Gwen said. We need to rescue my father and the others from the outpost. When he's safe, I'll decide what I want to do. Over the next hour, the two ate a meal and Eridor showed Gwen some of his spell books. She couldn't read the magical text, but he explained in more detail how magic worked for him. Once darkness fell and Tobias had yet to return, Eridor showed Gwen to a room where she could spend the night. We have a room at the inn, Gwen told the elf, but he shook his head. It's safer for you to stay in the tower. The soldiers can't track you here, and there's no telling what else Grimar is plotting now that he has the king's ear in his hand. Gwen's stomach was full, and she was getting sleepy, so she didn't argue. Eridor retired to his own room, and Gwen climbed into bed, stretching out on the comfortable feather mattress. She yawned and closed her eyes, only intending to rest them for a moment. The next thing she knew, Eridor was looking down at her. Morning light filtered in through the room's sole window, and the elf smiled. I've sent word to Amel. She's coming here to meet you. Who's Amel? Gwen asked, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She's the mage I told you about. I've also heard from Tobias. Is everything all right? Gwen sat up, worry for Tobias forcing her wide awake. He's fine, Eridor replied, but I have some bad news. Our spies at the outpost say that the prisoners have been tortured. Boris isn't doing well.
Chapter 12, Connell. Connell's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes roamed surrounding doors and alleyways for a route to escape. You do not need to fear me, Briac assured him. I'm not like my brother. How do I know that? Connell retorted. You don't. You'll have to trust me. He turned right into an alleyway and stopped when Connell didn't follow him. You can take your chances on your own, or you can let me help you. I will not force you. He continued on down the alleyway. His mind racing, Connell knew he wouldn't last on his own with Drewston looking for him. And once the man in the tavern spilled the news that he was in the city, it would be even harder. Noting that Briac hadn't bothered to wait for him, Connell decided he was his best option at the moment. Jogging to catch up, Connell matched strides with him. How do you know I'm not leading you back to Drewston? I don't, but at least you fed me. Briac chuckled. Let's hope your friend in the tavern decides it's not worth the effort to search for you. Stopping before a nondescript door, he quickly glanced up and down the alley before opening the door. Once inside, he turned and bolted the door and placed a crossbeam over it. Makes it hard to get in. And almost as hard to get out, Connell pointed out. I have other ways of getting out. Figured. Briac led him through the dark interior hallway to a set of stairs, then up two dimly lit flights to a door midway down the hall. Silently opening the door, he locked it behind him and slid a crossbeam into the holders. The room was inky dark until Briac held up a glow crystal that revealed an empty room with four hallways leading away. Follow me. Briac headed to the second hallway on the left. This place is all interconnected, so it's easy to get lost, sometimes even when you know where you are. Connell frowned, puzzling how one could be lost if he knew where he was. At the end of the hallway, a spiral staircase descended. Without hesitation, Briac curved around with the steps, the light lowering with him with each step, Connell close on his heels. After a far longer time than it took going up two flights, the stairs emptied into another large, dark, empty room with more hallways. This is crazy, Connell complained. Where are we? Patience, my young friend. We're almost there. Briac took the second hallway to the right this time. By the time they reached the solid oak door at the end, Connell swore that they had to be somewhere far beyond the city walls. Past the door was another set of spiral stairs that led up. How much farther? Connell huffed. Top of the stairs. Several minutes later, they emerged onto a platform, surrounded by solid granite. Connell watched as Briac pressed a stone, and a section of the wall swung open, light from a fireplace spilling through the opening. Where are we? Connell gazed around the spacious room, the walls carved from stone. We're inside the mountain behind the city. Briac retrieved a taper from near the fireplace and walked around the room, lighting sconces and candelabras, revealing a room far larger than Connell's first impression. Except for a wide, ornate desk near the fireplace, a reading chair close by, and several bookcases against the walls, The room was devoid of any decoration or personal touch. A single door adorned the wall to the right of the fireplace. You live here? Yes. Connell walked around the room, nearly stumbling over a small chest by the desk. Skirting the chest, he pointed to the door. I assume that leads to the kitchen, bedroom, and other rooms? I don't cook, Brack grinned. But yes, there is a sort of kitchen and other rooms. But let's get down to business, shall we? He scooted out a chair from behind the desk and sat. Tell me why my brother was chasing you. I thought you wanted to know about dwarves. Connell sat in the reading chair. Now that I know their names, I know all I need to know. Like what? Brack studied him for a moment, then relented. I suppose it's only right that you know, now that you're involved. Torgreth and Voldar are brothers, as you probably already surmised. They're from the dwarf kingdom of Gurumdur. They're master stonecutters and carvers, probably the best at their craft. Those two? Connell scoffed. How can that be? They're too young. And how old do you think they are? Brack said. Probably my age. Try doubling that, maybe even tripling it. What? Connell's jaw dropped. That's impossible. I've seen dwarves before, and they don't look like they're in their 50s. Brack shook his head. I don't know your experience with dwarves, but dwarves live longer than humans. And then there is the little consideration of what they were carving. Connell knitted his brows and recalled what Voldar said. Is when you ask them to carve totems and strange words and symbols that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. What were they carving? In a calm, quiet voice, Brack said, Rorken Orfil, the king of Gurumdur, has fallen under the spell of the silken tongue of Havard. Who's he? Havard is devoted acolyte of Grimmer, the Magebreaker. Grimmer, the Magebreaker. Who's he? Connell scrunched his face, hoping he wasn't expected to remember any of this. He's the advisor to King Torian. Grimmer is named the Magebreaker because he has been relentless in tracking down and killing anyone even suspected of being a mage or having any magic skills. The truth is that he only kills those he can't control. Those willing or forced to submit themselves to him are rune branded. Rune branded? Connell was suddenly aware of the cobra brand in his upper arm. I'll explain about runes in a bit. Grimmer needed someone who could carve runes and totems without understanding what they meant. That's where the two dwarves, Voldar and Torgreth, come in. At first, Rorken was fine with them carving runes, never suspecting the runes were incantations. But then he got curious as to what the runes said and asked Grimmer about them. Immediately recognizing he had a problem, Grimmer sent Havard to work his influence over the king. Havard's gift, his power, is his voice. Few can withstand the lull and enticement of his words. Once he focuses his attention on you, you are powerless and will do what he commands. That is what happened to King Rorken. Though king, the man is consumed with the mundane, the trivial, and the unnecessary. Havard actually rules, using the king as a puppet. Connell pondered the story. So what does that have to do with me? That's what I want to know. Let's get back to why my brother was chasing you. Connell shook his head. To be honest, I haven't the faintest idea. All I remember is him clasping my hand and the pain nearly killing me. Then when I tell him I was branded, you're branded? Brack stiffened. Yeah, I got a cobra brand burnt to my left arm. Here, I'll show you. Connell peeled off his shirt and twisted his body to display the brand. Connell suddenly grew somber. How long ago was this? Connell blinked in thought, surprised at how much had happened in between now and the branding. Yesterday. Yesterday? Brack exclaimed. That's impossible. The brand is healed. He frowned as he narrowed his gaze at the cobra head. How did they brand you? This looks like a tattoo on top of a brand. Puzzled, Connell bent his head to stare at his shoulder. To his surprise, the cobra head had color interwoven into the design. That's weird. Wasn't like that last night. You say this happened yesterday? Brack asked, his disbelief obvious. Yeah, if you don't believe me, you can ask Lord Farrell. He's the one who had me branded. Perhaps we should start from the beginning, Brack said. Tell me what happened. Connell related the incidents from the time of the betrayal and his capture to the present. Now you know as much as I do. Brack stood and began pacing, his hands clasped behind him. So they admitted they were looking for the king's son, and they suspected you might be him. Yeah, Connell sniffed. I don't know what they were drinking, but the whole idea is absurd from the start. I know my parents. They live in Irving. I know what I've been doing these past 20 plus years, especially these last years with Oscar, that scum. Greg stopped pacing. May I try something? Connell cocked an eyebrow. Is it going to hurt? Maybe a little. What are you going to do? Clasp your hand like Drewston did. Not on your life, Connell loudly objected, shaking his head. Last time was like the mother of all pain. It hurt worse than hell. But it's the only way I can determine the truth. What truth? Connell folded his arms across his chest, his fists hidden. The eagle will bear the vipers in his claws. Yet from the west, a cobra will rise and strike down the eagle. Connell glared at him. What the heck does that mean? Brock stood by the chair, gazing down at him. It is the prophecy of our future. The eagle is the king of Isental. The vipers are the children of the rightful king, returned to reclaim the throne. That the eagle has the vipers in his claws means the children will be captured and powerless against the king until the cobra, whoever he or she is, defeats the king. Connell blinked at him, wondering what he had got himself into this time. I still don't understand what this has to do with me. You have the cobra on your shoulder. So do lots of other folks. You are from the West. So are thousands of others. Your healing is beyond magical. Okay, you got me there, Connell sighed. It still doesn't mean I'm some sort of conquering hero. Besides, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Self-image a little inflated, Bragg smirked. Very funny. Connell cocked his head to the side. By the way, what happens when you find this guy? I protect him. So Drewston is chasing me because he wants to protect me? Connell cocked an eyebrow in obvious doubt. Bragg sat and leaned back. I find that puzzling too. The only way I can find out is to see what he saw. And how do you do that? Hand clasp. Lets me connect to your memory. We've been over this ground already. Besides, what will my memory tell you? I don't know until I see. I can plumb the depths to see your earliest memories, some of which you don't even know you have. But I can only do that via touch. Yeah, well, think of some other way. Should there be someone who can vouch for what happened? Surely the kid wasn't sent away with no one knowing he was the king's son. Otherwise, he could grow up being a vagabond, or a highwayman, or a merchant, or something quite unroyalty-like. And no one, not even him, would know about it. Brock pointed to the papers scattered across his desk, then to the books on the bookshelves. There are signs and hints, but one has to study and discern. I'm not the only one looking for the sun. King Torian has his own wizards and scholars searching the writings and scouring the land, tracking you down. Connell's brow furrowed. So, in other words, if someone thinks I'm the one, my life is over. Yes and no, Barak replied. Yes, if you decide to go off on your own without protection, King Torian will want you dead. And not just you, he will destroy everyone who suspects he might even remotely be with you or associated with you. So I'm pretty much screwed any way I look at it. His jaw clenched. Sadly, yes, for the moment. Will you let me determine the truth? Connell chewed his lips. How long will it last? Shouldn't take too long. That's not an answer. Not too long is relative. The sooner we try it, the quicker we can decide what to do. Heaving a frustrated and resigned sigh, Connell stuck out his hand, bracing for the pain as Bragg grasped it. At first, nothing happened, and his guard dropped. Then the pain exploded and he gritted his teeth, his body squirming in the chair, tears flowing down his cheeks. Just as he raised his other hand to pry the grip loose, Bragg let go. Gasping for breath, he lifted his head to see a smile curl the corners of Bragg's mouth. Oh, well, I have found you, my lord. That's not funny, Connell snapped. It's not meant to be funny. It's true. You are the king's son. Bragg heaved a sigh of satisfaction. I've been searching for years and years to find you. I can't believe you fell right into my lap. Of all the places I've been to, you end up here. Finally recovered, Connell dismissively shook his head. You sure you got this right? Shouldn't I feel some sort of revelation like, oh my God, I'm the long lost prince? It doesn't work that way. In time, you'll come to accept it. Brack turned away, exhaling a slow sigh, silently chastising himself for the lie. The truth was, he could only see so far back. There was a wall well before the birth mind. The memories he did see were of a harbor town and his father and mother. Yet by all rights, with the power of the memory probe, he should be dead. That in itself was enough to give him pause. But was it proof? It had the strength to endure death-dealing pain, along with his magical healing ability, surely pointed to him as the one. But he bore the mark of the cobra. Which one was he? The king's son, or the man who defeats Torian and claims the kingdom as his own? Maybe he was neither. Regardless, until Brack was sure, he knew he had to keep Connell safe, at least until he didn't need him anymore.
All right. That wraps it up for this week. So thanks for listening, guys. And we'll be back next week with the next 2 chapters.